Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this event. We are extremely glad that all of you could join us for the August edition of TECHRx series, Accelerating MedTech Innovation, where we bring to the forefront MedTech innovations in India. TECHRx is a collaboration between Inc. and Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone AMTZ. We are delighted to bring you this edition that marks more than a year of TECHRx shows and hope that you will take some valuable insights from the conversation today as well. Inc., with its decade long legacy, is a pioneer in accelerating the journeys of game changers all across the world. AMTZ focuses on a progressive initiative by being a center for medical technology, employment, innovative research, and incubation of startups. Together, Inc. and AMTZ have collaborated to create a dialogue between the scientific and social segments of the society with an innovative series of sessions titled as TECHRx. Today's session will be of a total 60 minutes with the last 15-20 minutes open for live Q&A discussion. So please type your questions on the YouTube comment box with your name, and the panelist will address them during the Q&A session at the end. Before I introduce our interviewer and guest today, can we please play the AMTZ video for our audience? With that, I would like to call upon Lakshmi Pratury. Lakshmi is the founder and CEO of Inc. and the host and curator of live events and inktalks.com. Lakshmi is an entrepreneur, curator, speaker, and empowering storyteller. She is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including being named as Inspirational Icon at the Audi Riz Awards in 2015 and being included in Forbes magazine's 2010 list of women to watch in Asia. She has written for leading publications like Your Story, Fortune, Deccan Chronicle, and has been featured as well. She has been growing as an inspirational thought leader on LinkedIn and has been growing as a content creator through digital shows like COVID Lockdown Live Series and Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. Please welcome Lakshmi Pratury, CEO of Inc. Lakshmi, can I please request you to switch on your mic and video?
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. And today we're going to have not just a great entrepreneur, but also somebody I've been very close to, I've been following for a long time. And just so you know, more than 12 years ago, I decided to move back to India, and I was in the Bay Area, and I was talking to one of the venture capitalists here, Anula, and who's a very prolific venture capitalist. And I asked her, I said, hey, you know, I'm thinking of going to India, and who are some of the people I should meet? Who are some interesting people, etc. And without any doubt, you know, she said, you must meet this very young entrepreneur I met. Her name is Anu, and she's doing some very interesting work, and you should meet her. And that's sort of how I met Anu over a decade ago. And she's one of the first people who has been at the forefront of genomics in India, who started, you know, what she calls Genome Patri. And with that, you can tell that Anu is not just a scientist. She's a scientist, she's a poet, she's a columnist. She's many things folded into one. So I love the name of her company is Mapmygenome, but what they do is called Genome Patri, you know, as you know, a takeoff on how we do Genome Patris in India. And she's co-founded this in 2013, and she's been through many, many innovative cycles of not just raising the money, but in terms of creating an awareness of genomics across India, both as a thought leader as well as a business. She's been the Women Entrepreneur of the Year award at Z Business. She's got special recognition by Indian Express. She had a Pride of Telangana award. She's an IIT Kharagpur Distinguished Alumnus Award, etc., etc. And she's also on the governing boards of IIT Hyderabad and BHUB and etc. And she's quite active even in the government circles, or whenever the government wants to do something in genomics, I always see Anu's name at the forefront of it. So I don't want to take too much time by introducing her. As I said, all you need to know is she's a woman of many talents. She's one of those rare combination of left brain and right brain. She's an amazing scientist and a very successful published poet. With that, I would like to have Anu take over the talk.
Thanks, Lakshmi. It's a pleasure. I know I was supposed to be in Vizag many months ago, and I guess that was an unfortunate time when I couldn't actually do that in person. So I'm glad that we've had this opportunity to be able to do this here virtually. So I thought that it'd be great to have more of question answers and maybe do a little bit of an introduction on what the future looks like and what we are doing at Mapmygenome, and then maybe open it up so that it becomes easier for everybody to ask questions. So I thought that I'll maybe just look at a little bit of what the future is going to look like, because clearly all of you are in the MedTech zone you're doing, and I could see from the video, it looks like an absolutely amazing facility. I'm so sorry I didn't get an opportunity to actually see it. But to be able to see what the future is going to look like a little bit, and then where we are presently, and what we did, at least as Mapmygenome, to support the pandemic response. So just to give a little, it's going a little bit further than I wanted. So I'd like to start off with a quote by Isaac Newton. It said that if I've seen further, it is because of standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think that when you look at a field like genomics and where we are today, if we wouldn't have been able to get to the point we are unless many thousands of scientists had done their work before and were able to contribute in terms of what the data type and everything else, in terms of the correlations, in terms of understanding. And I think that's where we started off, and we were able to build something that was of true value. So I think this is a core I constantly remember, because ultimately I think what we build hopefully will be useful for the next generation and so on. So I think just as a little background, I started in the genomics field about 20 years ago. I started a company called Ossimum Biosolutions. Of course, my background was in physics. I went to IIT, and that's where I initially started. But from physics to genomics, moved by a combination of chance, interest, and the fact that it was going to be intellectually stimulating. So we've been in the field for a long time, and I think there were several problems, I think, when you look at it from the perspective of what the future was going to look like, because we had businesses that were in the US, in Europe, and in India, and one of the things that we felt was strongly missing was the fact that there was lack of Indian data in everywhere that we looked at. There was also not that much focus on prevention when you looked at the Indian healthcare system in general, but clearly I think there were challenges in terms of the technology being very expensive, as well as, how do you create a value for something that is not currently in the market yet? How do we create that whole market share for a product that is probably people still don't know that they need it? So I think that's sort of where what we had as some of the major challenges that were there. Clearly, I think the US was a little bit ahead in terms of what we were seeing, where consumers were moving towards the clinic as well as to the consumer. And I think that was, for us, was the bigger challenge in terms of saying, how do you make sure that you're able to build something that is for the future, but the technology is available today? How do you start building that market, and how do you start building those products? And as always, I think for me, the inspiration came from things that was outside of, when you can cut off. And I went to the beach, read a few books. And I think over there, one of the things that really made a difference was in terms of looking at what a compass could do for just people who are either going into the sea or otherwise, helping them find the right kind of place that they wanted to go to. So one of the areas that we felt was going to be the most connected in terms of understanding of what we were doing was actually the horoscope, because that's sort of where you look at your health, your wellness, and who you're going to marry, and all of that. So I think we looked at the horoscope, looked at what you're trying to build in terms of for what consumers wanted, and that was the habits, because habits create preventive steps so that your health is going to be better. So I think that was sort of the inspiration. And then finally was, how do you actually build something like this in terms of creating an early prototype, and how do you launch these products? I think the advantage we had was that we had already had products that we had in terms of some of the IP that we had. We also created a lot of the early initial prototyping that we were able to build with the customers that we had. And but the bigger challenge was, how do you actually then go out into the market and be able to build a real company where people could actually feel the need for being able to do that? And I think that's where we said maybe giving it a name like a Genome Patri would be helpful in building something like that. So when we look at what the future holds for us, I think there are many, many things that are going to happen, especially in the space of MedTech, and that includes genomics and includes technologies like genome editing, or what we call as CRISPR. And for those of you who haven't read, I think there is a book called A Crack in Creation by Jennifer Doudna, and I think it's a fascinating field where you can see what what genome editing can do in the future, not so long future. I think a lot of it is already being done in the labs already. When you look at the artificial intelligence, people, companies like us use it in terms of some of the risk prediction and other things that we are doing. But I think when we go a little bit further, we'll find that this will be far more integrated, far more developed. And the personalized medicine that we are looking at in terms of what you can do on the personalized medicine front, whether it is in terms of choosing the right medicine, whether it is in terms of finding out what kind of preventive steps you can take, and also in terms of understanding different other interventional techniques that you can do. I think that's an area that is sort of technology is there. We are almost at that edge where it's going to become something that is going to be available to everybody pretty much. There are also things like you're looking at same-day cancer treatment. You're looking at treatment for diseases like Alzheimer's, because that's one of the areas that we don't currently yet have a very good, strong cure. We're looking at better vaccines. I think this year we saw that was already in place. We saw the DNA vaccines, the RNA vaccines, and many such things. There are going to be diagnostics with using voice, sound, and other things. And hopefully there'll be genome Patri for all. And the integration of omics with the clinical. And of course, I think there's nothing better than putting that together with smart lenses, smart sensors, and continuous monitoring. So for instance, somebody like me who does the genome, when I do the genomics, what do I do with that following? I think it's all of these get connected at some point of time. So when you're looking at what when we are talking about the future of personalized medicine and things like that, we're looking at something like a genome Patri, where you can order the test online. You're able to sample yourself. The DNA is then collected, and we are able to then look at this the genome book, where this quote by Matt Ridley says that the genome is a book that rewrote itself continually, adding, deleting, and amending over 4 billion years. So even though all of us are 99%, 9.9% alike, it is that little difference in the 3.2 billion code bases between you and me that makes the difference between why I'm the way I am and why you are the way you are. So I think that's what we help people to understand, whether it is in terms of understanding the genomic predisposition to different kinds of traits, like your cholesterol levels, why do some people put on more weight, why do some people metabolize something, as well as interesting things like some people can drink coffee without a problem and the others cannot. Then comes the other thing where you're trying to understand the risk for certain kinds of diseases and to be able to understand that what you can do in terms of being able to mitigate those risks. And then the third piece, which is to understand if you are a carrier of any specific or inherited condition that might have an implication in terms of the future generations. And then the pharmacogenomics, which is to understand if certain drugs work for you, and if they work for you, whether they are likely to work for you in the right dosage, and whether if they don't work for you, then are they likely to be toxic, and so on. So this is kind of the example of what we do in terms of understanding of risk. And you can see there'll be risk in terms of high, low, medium, and to be able to understand. So some examples, like I already mentioned, would be things like resilience, your avoidance of error, understanding of memory, which is more behavior related. And then there's nutrition related, then there's addiction related, and so on. And then the risk of diseases, like your high risk of diabetes. And I've written at the bottom, as you can see, that this part is my own report, where you can see that I have a high genetic risk for type 2 diabetes. And the way that doesn't mean that I would get diabetes. I think the way you look at this report is to be able to then say, what are the other interventions that you can do to be able to change that? And some of the things that I have done is diet and exercise. I went through a course of Panchkarma in Ayurveda to be able to make sure that some of the things can be looked at it from a more holistic perspective, and then also do a glucose monitoring. And I think that's an area that we'll start to see a lot more of in terms of understanding not just glucose monitoring, but also looking at monitoring your blood pressure, monitoring other parameters that we are not yet used to at this point of time. So after testing, you're doing counseling, you're correlating with family history and clinical history, you come up with a personalized plan, your diet changes, making sure you can do some amount of biohacking, and ultimately come up with a way of optimal living. So I think these statistics are probably things that everybody has already read, but it is actually quite stark when you look at that 80% of cardiovascular diseases and 60% of diabetes and actually 50% of cancers are all preventable if we can actually make those little changes in our own lifestyle and other things. And of course, I think genomics also helps you in trying to help you understand where you came from, and that DNA holds clues for that. And we were able to build that for even the smallest little clusters within India. And you can see over here, we have like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Northeast India, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and so on. So you can break it down into little pieces and find out where your ancestors actually came from. So in terms of just understanding the three big pieces, and I think currently I just told what we were mostly doing, which is in the personal genomics piece, where we are looking at fitness, wellness, health, pharmacogenomics, and ancestry. But there are two other very big divisions of ours, which is focused around COVID testing and other COVID-related tests, both in terms of understanding antibodies, blood parameters, and other pieces that we will ultimately put together with some of the other things that we are doing on the genomic side. And then we do the NGS, the for oncology and mother and child, and a lot of the newborn screening and NIPT tests and so on. So we are a team of about 200 people right now, who are all involved in currently in 4 cities, 2 labs, and and I think we plan to be able to expand further this year as well. So this is, I think I've already mentioned, you collect a sample, whether it's a saliva, blood, or tissue, you're able to process it through a microarray, NGS, or RT-PCR, and then you're able to then report it and so on. So in terms of understanding on what we have done for the pandemic, I think there are many different things that genomics has helped in. And one was to be able to find out the testing and the type of virus that you're trying to look at, whether it's sequencing the virus and trying to find that, or whether it is in terms of understanding of finding new drug targets, making vaccines or vaccine kits. But I think that the bigger value would be to be able to use this in understanding of our own immune system and using genomics to be able to understand the genomic predisposition so that ultimately we are able to then prevent pandemics in the future more than anything else. And what we had done in response to that was to be able to look at certain parts of what would affect the immunity and be able to come up with the cytokine storm, the SARS-CoV susceptibility. And as we go along, we keep adding out more features into that product as well. So if we just had to sum up, I think genomics today and in the future, it's going to be personalized, it's going to be preventive, it's going to be predictive, and it's going to be participatory. And what it means is that when we look at the drug that might work for you, it might not work for me. For instance, I think when I looked at the drug that my mom was taking, which is a well-known and most commonly prescribed drug called metformin, we realized that each person is slightly different from someone else, and she had to be given something else based on her drug profile. It is also going to move towards more preventive, because I think that's the cost for the consumer or the patient is actually much, much lower when it's at the preventive stage. You look at the predictive piece, because I think if you can predict, you can prevent and also personalize. And finally, without the help of the consumers that are there is no way that you can actually make something like this work if consumers are not participating in this process, because you need to make sure that information or value that is coming in from consumers is there. So I won't go through more details. I think with that, I can maybe stop and happy to take questions. But since this was Lakshmi, I thought I will put in a little bit of one of my poems, because I think a lot of people continue to ask me why I moved from physics into a field like genomics, and why I became an entrepreneur. And this was one of the things I had written. So as you can all see, for those of you who are fans of Richard Feynman, I think he was one of my favorite scientists. And I sort of put all these you can see all his books, but I made a poem based on those books. So I'd like to end with this little rhyme or actually not a rhyme. Surely I was joking that instead of Feynman lectures and assembling the 6 easy pieces that would give me the pleasure of finding things out, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and take the not so easy 6 pieces and imagine the ripple effect. But I said to myself, why do you care what other people think? Don't you have time to think the meaning of it all? My perfectly reasonable deviations are best described as an adventure of a curious character. Thank you.
I think that aptly describes adventure and curious. I think those are the 2 things that describe you, Anu. So I know you talked a little bit about being on the beach and reading and thinking about what can we do to change the origin of life in some ways. Where do we all come from, etc. I wanted to ask you, you also mentioned you've been at this for 20 years. Of course, you started when you were 10. So you couldn't have been more than 10 when you started. But what are some of the obstacles you faced as an entrepreneur? Because you've started this before genomics was fashionable, before people even knew what DNA sampling and things like that are. So what was you could have easily gone into some other field that is already known and made a lot more progress, but you chose something that no one knew about. That means a lot of education of the market had to be done before people understood. So what were some of the challenges that you faced, and what made you choose something so different and difficult in some ways?
So I would think that, we were in the US. I think, if I just wanted to have a comfortable and easy way, I think I would have done that, right? I think in some ways, I think genetically you're predisposed to one, risk-taking and to be able to, I think between me and my co-founders, I think we all look for also an intellectual challenge in some form. And I think if you look at just doing something that is maybe, let's say at that point of time, I think, if you went into IT services, for instance, I think that would have been a more regular thing to do. But I think that wouldn't have been exciting enough for me to pack up my bags and say, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to do something that's going to, really occupy my mind and be able to change the world in some form, right? I think, I was 28 at that time, not 10. So I think that was probably because you have to have something that you can truly feel really, passionate about. And I think unless you can feel that, something driving you, you will not be in that field for 20 years. I think, same with what you're doing, Lakshmi. I think it takes a lot of passion to be able to do something that you truly believe in, that can change the way either people, how they live their lives or anything else. And I think that satisfaction, I think, is probably way higher than anything else that you can do, according to me.
I agree. And I always say that if you take on something different and difficult like this, you have to measure your success every 10 years. You can't be measuring it every quarter. It's very difficult to move forward every quarter. Then you might make very short-term decisions that are not good. Now, one of the things, what you have done with your product and what you do, Anu, is that to give people a way to know about their own health in a very, very better way. Now, in what way can we expand this? And, how do you think India can build an inclusive health infrastructure? And can we create a system where our future generations can lead much healthier lives? And can we leapfrog a lot of the legacy problems we have of not enough hospitals, not enough doctors, all these kinds of things, to a future where we can showcase the rest of the world what taking charge of your own health would mean?
Absolutely. I think there are many ways. Like one could be to build something. So I think there are 2-3 issues right now that when you look at healthcare, I think one is accessibility. I think the big hospitals are all in the bigger cities, and a lot of times, many cities and small towns and villages definitely don't have access to that. But I think that is slowly being changed. I think luckily COVID did a lot of good for that whole understanding of both in terms of telehealth and other such pieces. But if we were able to, let's say, do something from a genetics perspective and be able to then focus our attention in making sure that, that from a preventive point of view, we are able to help, that could be one. The second could be building cheap technology that maybe villages can adopt and do something in terms of monitoring themselves. And I think that's where I was saying that currently I'm using like a sort of expensive sensor which is monitoring my blood glucose level. But if you could build, and I know that a lot of companies are building, you could build sensors that are able to do something like that. I think we are able to monitor at least base level of health for everybody. And we are also seeing that a lot of point of care devices are coming up. And if we are able to do that at a very low cost, I think we can then make it very accessible to a lot of the large part of the country. And so if you combine genetics with these low cost monitoring, I think that becomes a great way of being able to give the power of health to a larger audience that is there in India.
I know you were talking about COVID-19 and how it has, in some ways, accelerated people's acceptance of telemedicine and things like that. Do you see in any way, has there been an acceleration in people's acceptance of new technologies, their ability to look at themselves a little bit more deeper? Do you see a shift in acceptance of your products and what you're talking about in general out there after COVID-19?
Absolutely. I think we have started seeing that earlier we would get a lot of calls would come into our call center. People would ask a lot. They would, spend a lot of time. I remember a lot of people who started asking us these questions in 2013 and they converted. But what we saw this year was that we suddenly started getting orders from people all across the country without them even asking us what this product is about, which means that either they already know about what this product is from someone else, or I think they find enough material to be able to make those decisions on their own. So I think that is a shift where the customer is coming to you and you are not, reaching out, very, very, in the beginning, for instance, I think we had to pretty much go to every single person that we could find and be able to get there. So I think that's the difference. And I think a lot of the change has come about because people are much more aware. Almost everybody knows what DNA is, what RNA is. And thanks to COVID and the sequencing, everybody knows what a variant is and all of that. So I think that has sort of added to the comfort level of what people are thinking about in terms of what the product is likely to do. And the second is also, I think, a lot of people were affected by the pandemic as well. And I think health then becomes a priority because different people respond differently when it comes to, understanding of how your immune system is responding to a particular health problem and so on.
Mm-hmm. So here is my last question, and I'd like to open it up to everybody else. So please be ready with your questions. I would like, Anu, for you to talk a little bit about the range of products you have. And of course, we talked about Genome Patrika, but you also have baby map carrier screening, newborn screening, ancestry, and you cater to a variety of people. So tell a little bit about what are some of the new products you're working on and what's your vision for the company in the future? And tell us a little bit about especially the newborn screening and things, some of the things that you're doing, which could be very, very important for a child health.
So we are looking at two areas, and I think mostly it's mother and child, which is newborn babies, pregnant women, and their journey through this process. And we are looking at oncology because I think what we were doing in Genome Patrika was mostly assessing risk. So we are helping people to be able to prevent and be able to get to that. Now, if you look at it from the next level of, or a different level, from a different viewpoint, I think when you look at a woman who's going through, through pregnancy, there are many different things that are going on, both in terms of her body and also the baby's understanding of that. So few things that we've been able to add on is to be able to, one, to get on to understanding some of the blood tests that you can do for during the pregnancy. But the more important thing is to be able to do, and we were doing a little bit of the newborn screening earlier, but only a genetic part of that newborn screening, where we were able to then match. Before pregnancy, we were able to do the for parents to do that carrier screening, and then when the baby is born, to do a screening for the baby when they are born, so that you can find out if there are any diseases or anything where they would need any interventions and so on. So one is to be able to do that both in terms of biochemistry, but also in terms of understanding it from genetics point of view, because that becomes a confirmation of the actual test result that you get. And then following that, we find that a lot of these babies could be actually saved and could be able to treat them much more effectively, because you can give them the right intervention at the right time. And many times it's just a change in diet. It could just be a change in or a medicine that is available with the doctors today. But the challenge was in making it accessible, making it something that people can actually find. So one was to be able to add on these tests. And the second was that we added on the Mapmygenome, which was to match the couples before conception, so that you can find out if there's something that they should be aware of before having children.
Mm-hmm.
And on the oncology side, what we have done is that while some of these tests are available in the market, what we did find was that one of the big roadblocks was that the cost of these tests was quite high. So we looked at some of the more common cancers. We talked to a lot of physicians who are treating these patients, and we have come up with low-cost variants of these next-generation sequenced products with very high definition or depth, so that we are able to then come up with low-cost but very targeted products for patients seeking attention, so that they don't go to genomics at the last instance, but come as the first level and are able to therefore get better treatment. So I think that's sort of where the way we look at the whole, those two areas, both in terms of oncology and mother and child.
Great. I'd like to open it up to the audience, and also if there are any questions online, please, Cheryl, go ahead and ask them if you got anything online. And I'd like to open it up to the audience who are there, if anybody wants to get up and ask a question. Okay. We got,
I think
okay.
someone's, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, unmute and also just tell your name and
Yeah, sure. Sure. Hello, both of you. I'm Rimi, and I'm right now sitting in AMTZ. So what you are doing, Anu, is incredible, to be honest. And what I have understood in a layman's language, if I can translate it, that you are doing an astrology of genome, right? An astrology of a human body, right?
So let me clarify it so that you don't think I'm doing some hocus pocus over here.
No hocus pocus. It's like, you're giving a complete report, like how people go to astrologers and get a report of their lifeline and career and everything.
Absolutely.
So you're giving a proven, researched paper on health, right? So It's a very interesting topic. And I was just quickly going through the website and I found out. So I come from a marketing background. So I would like to understand, how do you see your product reaching to the market? What is your go-to market strategy? Or because it's an interesting and it has heavy potential, to be very honest, because we all want to know. And there is lack of awareness also, right? Everybody wants to know these things nowadays, and they can afford, I guess. So what is your go-to market strategy? And next is how expensive this tests could be, maybe now and in coming future. And so I would like to know, will there be any app-based solution that you would be looking forward to, or what is the, if I can say in the next year or maybe 5 years from now?
So one is that we certainly have we have an app that is there. We have a website where you can download and see your reports at any point. So that is the last part, so that I don't forget that. The second thing that you asked was, the first thing that you asked was, how do we market these products? And I think we do this by two different ways. One is using online channels like our own website, Amazon, 1mg, Geo, and variety of different things. We work with a lot of corporates, and we also, on the second side, we work with a lot of hospitals and other channel partners that allow us to be able to get that. So we're trying to make this as part of preventive health checks, and we are soon. Yeah.
So mostly it is B2B, if I'm not wrong, right?
So it's B2C as well, mostly B2C.
Okay.
B2C, but we also, it's B2B2C as well. So we, some hospitals have packaged it as part of their health checks and so on. But what we are going to be doing now is that we are also going to be adding on some of the blood parameters. So earlier we used to recommend that people do that, but now we'll be able to do that by ourselves as well. So we can test for the regular normal blood parameters that you would want as well. And we're going to be opening labs across the country, so it becomes easier for people to be able to access any of our test centers.
And she also asked the cost of what does it cost to do this.
So I have to clarify, there are multiple types of doing genome testing, right? So let's take some of the basic ones. So when you look at Genome Patri, what we are doing is we are looking at certain markers across the whole genome. So about 750,000 markers, and we are able to build something up where you are looking at it from a prevention point of view. So we are saying that you are likely to be at risk of something, and this is your game plan. This is what you can do to change that. Right? That is one. So those would be in the price range of 10,000-15,000 rupees. Then you have the second part, which is the sequencing piece, right? So when you're looking at, if someone is suffering from cancer, and you want to be able to take a tissue and be able to do an exome sequencing to find out if certain drugs are likely to work, that would be in the price range of 30,000 to 40,000 rupees, or and if you're doing a targeted, it'll be much lower than that. And then if you're doing, let's say, the whole genome sequencing, then typically that cost is around 1 lakh rupees, which is basically sequencing 3.2 billion base pairs. Now, when you're doing all of this, there are 2-3 more pieces that you have to remember, and people always get confused because sometimes you might just be doing an RT-PCR for one gene. That can be as low as less than 1,000 rupees because you're just looking at one portion of the genome. And then you're doing a whole genome sequence. You have to sequence it 30 times to be able to get to the right kind of confidence in terms of what you have. And if you're doing like a cancer study, then you're doing it at 500 or 1,000 times depth. So you're sequencing every little piece of it so that you're absolutely certain that you find the right mutation. So I think it's different for everything, but I think on an average, when you look at the test, and right now, I think, for instance, we are offering people Genome Patri plus a heritage at about 10,000 rupees. So that's a little bit in terms of what we are doing. And heritage is a product for ancestry, and Genome Patri is the one where we are looking at 100 parameters and looking at your overall health. How cheap can it get? I think there are two factors that are going to be sort of, it has been coming down quite significantly. But I would say that the two limiting factors will be that you would need a genetic counselor who's well-trained. And if you don't have that, then the value of the product goes low because the real value comes when you can actually put in that piece together. So one is to make sure that if you have a good genetic counselor and it's not yet an automated piece, so you have to add in that part of that piece that is there. So your cost of the chip has been going down, but at some point, I think that it will have, maybe it will come down to 5,000 or a little bit lower than that as well. And maybe at some point, who knows, it will come down to 2,000, 3,000 rupees as well. So I think that's where it will go to, but you have to find newer ways to be able to make sure that it can be sustained at that price point. Hope that answers.
Also, I think, Anu, one of the things I observe, I think also people should be and are willing to spend more on themselves to find out more about themselves, because we don't mind going to a restaurant and dropping 5,000-7,000 rupees to have one meal, but this is something like a lifelong something that can help you, but we are not used to thinking like that. So I think it's changing a lot now in terms of people wanting to invest in their health. Yeah. So there's a question from online. It says, what sparked your interest in genomics, and what triggered you to move beyond laboratory information management systems to delve into the world of personal genomics?
So I have to first clarify. One, I think when I got into genomics for the first time, that was in 2000. And I think, as I was mentioning, it seemed like a very interesting field. Right? That was the most interesting thing. That was the human genome was about to get sequenced. It was something I knew nothing about at that point of time. But when I looked at what it could do, I think it looked like it was a field with immense potential. So that was one. The second was, at that point, we also had a co-founder who understood the field. So it was not like we were going into it with a completely, it was not just me. So there are other people in the team, and we were able to bring in a lot of good team members that actually understood what genomics was. I think I learned on the job. And so did other people. I think we continue to be able to add on to that knowledge, because this is an area that is constantly changing every single day. The second part someone asked is, why did I move from lab information systems to other parts? I have to say that the lab information products was something that we built, which was an afterthought. What we were first doing was actually a software for sequencing and gene expression. And the reason we built a lab information product was that we wanted to make sure that we looked at systems for biologists from a biologist's mind and not from an accountant point of view. So that's how we built the lab information systems. And we continue to do that. It's not like we've given up on that piece. But what is exciting was that when you start building all these things, you also are able to find out what you can do potentially in the future. And I think some of it came through by accident, because when we were in Ossimum and in 2005, I think the first acquisition that we did, and we had done 3, that came in through a little bit of an accident, and we built up because we started acquiring companies first in Germany, then in Netherlands, and then in the US. We became one of the largest genomic services companies. And I think we were already had labs in 3 continents by the time. So it has been since 2005 that we got into the lab business, but it was mostly a B2B business, and we were working with large pharmaceutical and biotech companies. What changed in terms of what we are doing in Mapmygenome was the focus towards moving towards the clinicians and towards patients and to consumers. And I think that was, I thought was initially was also an intellectually challenging area, because clearly I had not worked directly working with consumers. It was something people said, what you do is nice and funky, geeky, and all of that, but nobody could understand what we were doing. So I think for me, it became a challenge that I wanted to make sure that people should have access to this technology, and that's how we got into it.
Okay, we have another question from AMTZ audience. Right.
It's on mute.
You're on mute.
Hello, Anu. This is Shishir from AMTZ.
Hi.
Glad to see you here. Finally, you made it.
Good to see you too.
I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, how accurate these Genome Patri is? And number 2, are there any questions which Genome Patri can't answer in terms of healthcare?
I'm sure there are questions that we can't answer, but so in terms of accuracy, I think there are 2 pieces to it. When we are in Genome Patri, we look at a lot of multi-gene conditions, right? And a lot of the multi-gene conditions might have something that someone hasn't yet discovered. So there is that possibility of what science hasn't discovered yet. The second part is that in terms of understanding it from a technical perspective, I think that is an easier part, right? So you're able to understand, you're getting the call rates right, you're getting all of that right. That part is like, you're at 99.9% accuracy. That part is good. On the side where you're looking at the prediction of this thing, I think, as we get more and more data and more smaller data sets that you can do, you can actually start making even better models out of it. And that's where your AI comes into the picture. but it all depends. It's like a feedback loop that you're getting, and it's constantly getting better. So that is what I would say. But there is another part. I think a lot of people say that, if you predict, and I was showing you all, I said it's predicted that I'm at almost 3 times the risk of an average person in diabetes. Does that mean I'll get diabetes? Now, if you look at my family, everybody has. But the reason I don't have it yet is that, one, maybe I will, who knows, if I'm a little bit careless, I will get it. But it is mostly that there is a lot of effect that your lifestyle has in a lot of these multi-gene conditions. And therefore, that is the whole purpose of doing something like this, because you're pushing people towards reducing that risk of disease. And did I miss something?
No, I got my answer.
Right.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, Anu, there's one last question from online, which is Hem Sundar, and saying, is it possible to find a reason for diseases like chronic kidney disease, etc., through the work that you do?
Yeah, so we are doing quite a lot of diseases around the, they're both in terms of understanding several kidney related issues and some of the other, even things like your, on the Crohn's disease, IBD, and other such parameters as well. So there are all of these conditions that we cover. And I think we probably mentioned all of that on our website. If not, I'm happy to, make sure that I can send out a list of what all is currently covered. The second part is that if it is not covered, it can always be sequenced, and you're able to do that. So that is the second thing. So one is a ready-made product, and the second is a more a la carte. If you're looking at something specific, you're able to then get that information. So a lot of times we get people who call us and say, my father or someone had this mutation, is it likely that I have that as well? So a lot of times if there is a existing condition, we would typically do a sequencing of the patient and make sure that we understand if that has been hereditarily passed on to the next generation or not.
So Anu, I really want to wrap up by thanking you and also saying that, one of the reasons I always like featuring you and is because you're onto something not only human, but also it's very important for innovative companies like this to come from India and go global. When I look at something like 23andMe getting multi-billion-dollar valuation, and someone like you is doing same, if not more work, having to prove ourselves in India, I think it really is something that needs to be changed. And I really believe that. So first of all, really, it's a long journey. You're a marathon maker, a marathon runner, and you're like we are a sprinter and a marathon runner at the same time.
You remembered.
So I really want to congratulate you on this and being at it. I mean, you've been at it. You've not given this up at any given point of time. So that's the first thing, is about the importance of such entrepreneurship from India that can really be global, is extremely important. And second thing is, I think as you were saying with this COVID-19, etc., it's been a huge wake-up call for the world on just health of this universe. The way we treat the nature, the way we treat everything, the way we treat ourselves is very, very important. So I think the work you're doing to let us know about ourselves. And thirdly, I don't want to undermine one of the things you said in the beginning, is that anytime any global research is done, there is no data sets from India, no data sets on Indians. So while the information is confidential, the aggregation of that information can feed to the data sets based on which research will be funded, based on which medicines will be prescribed, based on which many things will happen. So I really want to say that, doing that is extremely important to have Indian data set as part of any global research. So on these 3 counts, I really want to congratulate you and thank you for taking the time. I know you were just mentioning last time she actually made it to Vizag and couldn't make it to the campus because of some agitation that happened, and poor girl had to be, we just didn't know how to get her out. It was like a drama, So despite that, Anu is so dedicated to wanting to talk to AMTZ that we made this happen. And I hope when things are a little bit better, I'm sure you'll be visiting the campus. But thank you so much for everybody on campus. Our next will be in September. Our guest is Dr. Sriram Nene, and so we look forward to seeing you as well for that. And Anu, big thank you for your time and for not giving up on coming to AMTZ one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everybody.